Hyvää iltapäivää, ystävät, vanhat uudet ja tulevat. Olen hyvin innoissani voidessani puhua kanssani. Näillä muutamilla sanoilla minulla on kunnia saattaa tämä konferenssi päätökseen ja laittaa luille uusia tapoja toimia artikko-lähettelijänä. Good afternoon, my friends. Woo! I've only been nervous about that moment since August. Good afternoon, my friends, old and new, and yet to be made. I'm excited about tonight. This is like game day for me. I hope to share some words which will honorably end this conference and begin some new ways of thinking about being an ambassador for what Art Eco is. For those of you who are not as fluent in Finnish as I am, I believe that's what I said, although I trusted Jussi to do the translation, so I may have just ordered pizza. Okay, this presentation is going to take place in like 3 versions. Some are kind of inspirational, some boring, and we'll get you up and out of your seats at the end of this so that we can end on a high note. I spend my life in practical, so maybe I have a little bit of help for you as well. All right, my background is as a teacher and scientist. I have a degree in biology. My first, I guess my default behavior is to be a scientist. And so for some of you who have spent the last years convincing me that scientific ways of exploring the world aren't inspirational, you don't know how much of a nerd I am, and I do find some excitement in that. But I hope through this presentation to explain how much I have transformed. I am a parks advocate. For 12 years, I've worked for an organization called Stark Parks, which is, for you Finns, is a maybe new concept, but we have privatized our nature, our environment, and our spaces in the United States, and therefore we need public agencies to step in and defend what is common. And so I'm an advocate for that, even though actually tomorrow is my last day. So I will always be a parks advocate because I am so passionate about that role of public agency in our community. I'm a community project manager. I do a lot of random projects in and around the Stark County community. My boss and I used to say that I was the chair of the harebrained idea department. So when somebody came up with some crazy idea and said, I wonder if we could do parks and public health, they would inevitably turn to me and say, go figure it out. So it's been a lot of fun. And now working as a consultant to hopefully do that kind of stuff for more than just one agency. I'm for hire, FYI. Yeah. So the first part is to talk a little bit about how this international collaboration was born, and that's the FINNspiration component of the presentation. Then I want to talk a little bit about Arts for Parks, which is a way that I am intentionally hoping to continue with the lessons I've learned and make a direct impact on the community and the folks who are in our nature spaces. And then we'll end with a call to action, because I think we need that. So we'll wrap things up that way. The good news is that I'm the last presenter, which means you're done when I'm done. And so if we get through this faster than expected, nobody's going to complain. And if I drag this on, well, you're free to leave, I guess. I want to thank some folks. Rebecca has been a great partner and friend. I met her, it was in 2009 at a conference, after being kind of kicked into gear by my advisor and telling me I needed to go somewhere and do something. She said, here's these eco-justice people, why don't you go and visit them? I said, I don't know them. She said, go have lunch. And thankfully people like Rebecca were there to welcome me in. the Eco-Justice Education family, all of you folks from Eastern Michigan and beyond, Derek, my brother from a very different mother, and the cohorts from Eastern Michigan. The first Finns I met, Jani, Vesa, and Olli-Jukka, and then the others. You'll get yours in this presentation. So let me explain how this even came to be. The Finn House. The Finn House was a unique place. I know the smells, I know the knickknacks on the walls, I know how to use a coffee maker because I woke up the first morning and recognized that there were people in this planet who like coffee more than I do, and they couldn't figure out the coffee maker. So I had to figure out how to do that at the Finn House. The Finn House is a house in Ypsilanti, Michigan that was usually empty during the winter time because the family would go to Florida, I guess. And so one of the students in the program offered it up for visitors. This was the first conference I really said, I'm just digging in. I'm going to go early and I'm going to stay late. And there was an opportunity to stay for free somewhere. I didn't know where. So I got a hold of Rebecca and said, I'll take it. She said, well, it's a house with a bunch of Finnish philosophers. Okay, all right. Yeah, that was the second year. But so the first year I'm thinking, oh my goodness, stereotypes of Finns, stereotypes of philosophers. Well, it's going to be a quiet place. I get there, and thankfully I was not let down and made some immediate friends. The second year, I said, I want the Finn House. I want it, that's it, that's all there is to it. And she said, well, that's fine, Jani's coming back, but there's 2 artists that you're going to meet. And so I showed up and I met halfway through a pre-conference activity, and I see Jussi walk up and he's got this blue spiked hair, and Rice is wearing one of her big dancing outfits, and I thought, oh, this will be interesting. And Rice, I find out only last year, was like, damn it, there's going to be an American staying with us. But yeah, hopefully her feelings have changed. So the real key here is that there's a bunch of imagination that happened in this place. With the philosophers, the first year we solved problems, or at least came up with solutions to certain problems. I don't know if we remember any of those. I have found that they do strategic philosophizing that's based on where the pubs are. So you take a question and you sit down with a drink and you have awkward silence and you work through an issue, and then once you feel good, you don't start anything new. You just go to a different pub, and then that's where the new thing starts. And a new question gets dropped on the table, and so just so much fun with them. And then the being with Raisa and Jussi was a totally different experience, and I was not an artist. I would debate that I am probably still not, but these two did their damnedest to convince me that I was. And so through that, we had some interesting experiences. So after working just for a few days with Raisa and Jussi, we decided that we needed to continue something. I used some grant dollars, don't tell the foundation, because this was not their intention, to come to Finland. And so in June of 2016, I came and I hiked with artists. I explored the city, I explored the parks, and wandered around. And I think that a couple key things that came out of that was that I had some really childlike exploration. I'm a scientist. I'm a nature guy. I knew enough to feel comfortable in those spaces, but yet what I found was a really different way of exploring nature, and I'll get to that in a moment. I've apparently learned that, yes, everyone is an artist. I'm still working on that, but I learned that. It was drilled into my head, so I'll show some off and see what you think. And then I learned what it means to harness the power of arts and try to find a space between arts and science and where these things fit, and how the two can bring about a greater understanding and develop solutions that are meaningful. I've been wondering about that question for years and never had the background to dig in. So I took this picture on a hike with Jussi on a hillside near Sioro, and what I want to stress here is that when I said the childlike exploration, I'm used to leading. I'm used to having a group of school kids behind me at a park, and we go off through the park and we point out this and we talk about that. I learned very quickly that UC was not doing that for me. And in fact, I was leading, and I didn't know where I was going. And he was okay with that. I'm sure he wouldn't have let me get eaten by a Finnish crocodile or something, but he found out very quickly that I love mosses and lichens and ferns and things. So I took this picture in just what I thought was one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, which is way up on top of the hill. There's these giant rocks, and it looked like little, they looked like trees. Like I could just imagine in those spaces, little fairy houses and some other life form that I'm not sure of, just surviving there. So I just took that picture. I thought it was a pretty cool one. And then, of course, I've learned that everyone is an artist. This is my wife, and Luke and Lauren. Man, we were picking berries, and that's good shit, you know? I gotta move on from them. All right, so an inspiration of Arts for Understanding. I had heard of Kalevala when I was here, and in a moment between dancing and singing at Rebecca's house at Eco Justice Conference last year, I ordered the book. And no, I don't know when it came up in conversation, but I looked it up and I ordered it, and then I forgot that I ordered it, and it showed up, and I realized how big it was, and I was like, okay. But the cool thing about it was that it just kind of drew me in. The story development and the character development, and what I loved was the origin stories. So I was inspired to put together an origin story to kind of understand this art eco thing. So I don't know why this one's hard for me. So in the beginning, what we know today was not always such. The team of three, two masters and their apprentice, now familiar, once were strangers. Like hero tales throughout the ages, theirs too begins with a mystery. Each owns a story linking them to the land, the origin of their powers. The first one is the ribbon. When Sister Risa, daughter of Kangasala, protector in the sky, moves above boundaries of land and water, viewing the world thusly, sees the faults of man. Heeds the warning signs of Mother Earth, her tales are told and lessons flow from her fingertips and toes. Years ago, not many, not few, but rather in between, Risa, now passionate soul, was but only a ribbon, tightly wound about the foot and leg. She embodied the discipline and tradition of her dancer. Though once drawn tightly each day, the dancer lost her strength and the ribbon thus sagged. As her dancer struggled, so too did the ribbon. The structure and form of the dance seemed no longer sufficient, and the dancer's true feelings moved her in her new ways. As teacher retreated deeper into tradition, the dancer resisted, knowing something else must be right. With the final straw, the dancer escaped and fled to the forest. As she ran, the ribbon loosened and caught on a thorn. The dancer ran, the snagged thread unraveled the ribbon and unraveled the dancer too. A gust of wind carried the thread above the ground and through the treetops. The ribbon and dancer, now one, no longer bound, found freedom. Floating along the breeze above land and water, she then lived the currents, the language of the wind. The wind gods infused knowledge upon a thread, told of changes through the years. For 3 days she floated. On the first she met a warbler who sang the song of the traveler. The warbler, wise from such travel, sang of a beautiful planet. Flying over lands of foreign tongues, she knew nature's songs, though diverse, were clear, harmonious. Sadly, the warbler sang of man's words which made no sense. On the second, she met a grouse, and the grouse sang the song of the resident. At home on the forest floor, the grouse sang of her love of place. Season upon season, she watched neighbors, both friend and foe, move about in networks not understood by man. On the third day, she met a swan, and the swan sang out for the lakes, rivers, and seas, ancient songs of the water, stories built upon the characters who dwell therein, and new songs saddened with persuasion of man's narrative. Upon all of this thread, Upon all of this, the thread, now wise, recognized that fulfillment is not in dancing for the dance's sake, nor for the teacher. Like the wind's language, her movement could sing the songs of wisdom, meant to express a presence, a place among others. And at that moment, a mother bird swooped in among the currents and caught the thread. And within its nest among the spruce branches, the blackbird secured its materials for the dancer and thread. For your help, he will be set loose upon the wind. The thread, however, asked to return to the dancer's native form. For her care of the little birds, the wind children, she was set free. Having learned the wisdom of the sky, showing commitment to its songs, she was called to dance thusly, to impart the wisdom for people of the land. With such a charge at hand, she journeyed forward in search of the sages of the forest and the water. A team was needed, a gang of song-bearers, to speak for the voiceless, to interpret knowledge of the earth not yet known to man. Next, the spruce. Ypsi, tree son of Suro, forest brother to wolf rock and soil, descendant of Mother Spruce, had spent many years grounded in one place. Mother Spruce was a large, sturdy tree growing above all others on the north slope. Of such age, she counted many sons and daughters among her limbs, and many more of further generations her twigs and buds. One such limb son was Ypsi. Spindly and wild, he twisted and turned among his brothers and sisters. From his vantage, he watched over the forest and grew wise of its ways. As the birds moved by season through forest, he greeted each, and with friendly words, he loved those neighbors who suffered each long winter together. With this knowledge of place and high perspective, he became teacher of the forest lessons and traditions. He counted among his students the ferns, berries, grouse, and lynx, wildflowers, oak seedlings, and even a random larch. For season upon season, traditions of the forest freely shared among friends and visitors dripped from his bark to nurture the forest. For season upon season, he greeted the same families of forest dwellers until one. That season was different. The robin abandoned the nest and swans waved goodbye much later than usual. He pondered and spoke thus. Why have the families moved forth from this forest, from this bough of a lovely spruce so late? At this very moment, no sooner nor later, did the mother spruce feel the first of many cuts. For 3 days that lumberjack labored with such work. On the first he chopped. Mother resisted, but then relented to her fate. On the second he felled the great mother, and in her final moment she connected her heart and head to the soil which gave her such strength. On the third he cleared the limbs, not knowing her full worth. Upon reaching limb son Ypsi, the lumberjack gave no pause. He quickly separated the spindly wild limb from mother spruce, and at this Ypsi felt great pain. The separation of limb from root broke the chain of traditional source of knowledge and strength, and he felt destined for the warming stones and the sauna of strangers. Though the lumberjack felt differently. Its winding shape would make neither good lumber nor good tinder, and he thus cast it out into the forest pond. Long there he lay in the tea-stained water, where he took on the rich energy. Flexing his bark like flesh and strengthening stem to bone, the waters prepared Ypsi for something more. At the poke of an angler's hook, he was lifted from the litter and drawn out from the black waters. He was thrown near the warming fire to dry and burn. Seeing his fate face to face, Ypsi sang unto the sky to save him from the angler's fire. And as morning came, the coals had smoldered and the warmth turned cold. Ypsi shook off the ashes, not burned, but rather tempered and strengthened. He then pondered and uttered thus, Great spruce mother, though your stem is now milled and limbs cast about, guide me out of these ashes and into the world. Make me man so I may speak for the forest among those who cannot hear. There I might seek answers and make use of my long-valued stories. At that he rose from the dust and began a journey. For 3 days he ventured. After 1 day he rested on a stump, weakened for lack of nourishment. Ahead of Ypsi was a fallen beehive, not the largest and not a small one by any means, but one of sufficient honey. From this he nourished his tissues with its sweetness and loosened his joints with the smoothest of wax. The second day brought about growth. Worried and weakened, Ypsi feared not having the strength to pursue his adventure. Late in the day, he fell at the door of the smith. With all his might, he pushed open the door and greeted the hammer wielder. Asking for strength, the smith responded and pounded out a strong copper wire. This he wrapped around spindly Ypsi and created the human form he desired. And on the third day, the wild wind blew from the north and chilled the trail. With many more miles to go, Ypsi called upon the wind to guide him toward shelter and a blanket of warmth. At this call, Wind Sister Risa arrived and prepared a felt blanket of the finest wind-blown threads of wisdom. Jussi gently placed the felt on his shoulders. Now plant amongst human, Jussi set about to speak for the trees in his forest community. With native spirit, forest wisdom, and Wind Sister's partnership, he journeyed from the North Slope out toward the world. Together, Wind Sister and Forest Brother ventured to find the missing pieces of their song bearers. The water teacher. Young Satu, water sister of Näsijärvi, voice of the waves, also has a story. Years before, not many, not few, more of something in between, Satu was the chilled water's currents. She spent her days moving between the lake, rapids, and river. The schools of fish sought her guidance for protection. The otters listened to her words as they sought nourishment, and the water lilies only bloomed upon her direction. Once at home with the water lilies and frogs, Satu grew worried about the conditions of her watery place. Over some time, she noticed changes. The wisdom of the ages no longer matched the experience of the day. Lilies bloomed earlier and earlier. Otters bore young at new seasons, and fish awoke from their winter days much earlier. As she thought, she spoke thus. Do you all not notice the shoreline deepening and the water warming? Her lungless neighbors laughed heartily. Of course we have. Farther it is for the otter to run and catch us, and warm the water for our comfort. She thought further. Are none of you worried for these changes? Laughter followed again. Silly water sister, you worry too much for us. Stick to your teaching of the basics and worry not your mind of such things. For the rains will fall, and the cool waters of the hills will soon return. But as the fluid walls of her lake home closed in, she asked the great power for a chance to be free. She wished to seek rightful blame. And in quick response, Wind Sister Risa and Forest Brother sung unto the sun to set itself low in the sky. With darkness coming, the warm vapors rose, and Water Sister was freed from the waves. There, a new sibling to both, soon lifted from the lake as a fog. Shapeless at first, her vapors swirling, she sought firmness. Incapable of speaking foreign tongues, neither of the forest nor the wind, incapable of the humanity needed for her journey, sister and brother set about working on her. For 3 days they toiled. On the first, wise Risa breathed the vapors from shapeless into fluid human form, through teaching the movements of the wind, while Jussi set about sculpting this blank into final form, still fluid but now fierce. On the second, her mind was opened. First only capable of language of the perch, roach, and salmon, she now sang songs of the others in many tongues, human and more than human. And on the third, they strengthened her heart. With many battles ahead, it needed training. They formed it to beat like a strong, impassioned human, but ensured it retained the rhythms of the waves. And preserving all wisdom of the waves and the freedom to swim with her lungless neighbors, Satu was now free to join others as they prepared for the journey. So,